The Temple Mount, an ancient landmark of deep and fundamental value to several religions, a location of deep history, culture, and importance to billions of people around the world, which really raises the age-old question, is there a giant, several thousand-year-old labyrinth built within by King Solomon used to house the Ark of the Covenant? It's a good question, and if that intro feels a bit random, bear with me a bit for this one because this genuinely is based off some legitimate sources. Before we start, however, please consider dropping a like and /or subscribing. I'm trying to get to 10 million subscribers, so it really helps out my channel, and I always appreciate it. To begin with, there is an actual, very simple question, which many have wondered for a very long time, which is, where exactly is the Ark of the Covenant? For those of you who don't know, the Ark of the Covenant, or the Aron as it's called in Hebrew, is an old biblical artifact built by the ancient Jewish people as they wandered through the desert after leaving the land of Egypt. It was one of many such artifacts. The original temple menorah was one of them. There were 2 altars crafted and a bunch of other things, but few were quite so important as the Ark of the Covenant. It was made of gold, actually, specifically an outer box of gold, an inner box of wood, and then another inner box of gold with 2 gold bars stuck through rings in the sides so it could be carried, along with a cover with 2 gold-carved cherubs, or cherubim as they're called in Hebrew, little angel-like sculptures that were attached to the top of the cover. Anyways, the altar was stored in the holiest, most exclusive part of the tabernacle, and later the temple, the part which was entered only once a year during the Yom Kippur service by the high priest, which is actually a bit odd, as the Ark of the Covenant was essentially just a storage device. Within it was kept the tablets of the 10 Commandments, both sets, the broken ones and the unbroken ones, which are made of sapphire, apparently, according to another commentary, along with Aaron's staff and the manna, or the mun, the food which fell for the Jews in the desert. But evidently this is a really important and holy artifact, as a few people got apparently incinerated just by looking at it when they weren't supposed to be doing that. So you got an extremely profoundly important artifact with extreme religious and historical significance. So where exactly is it? There are a number of theories. The first one is that the Vatican has it. I don't know if there's any evidence for this at all, and it doesn't really fit with some of the later timelines, as you'll soon see, but it is a notion. The general idea goes that basically after the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem by the Roman Empire, many artifacts of the temple were ransacked and carried back to Rome as depicted in the Arch of Titus. For instance, you can see right here the temple menorah being carried off. At that point, many of the treasures and artifacts were then melted down as used by the Roman treasury to build things like the Colosseum and others, and from there it really could have gone anywhere, but the idea is that just as the Crusades started breaking out, the Vatican just snatched up all the important artifacts that they could find and stored them in their basement, I guess. Is that true? Maybe? I don't know. Probably not. See, if you'd look in a different source here, the Talmud, one of the most central texts in all of Judaism, specifically in Tractate Yoma, the book discussing the laws of Yom Kippur, it gets into a discussion about the location of the Ark. This was written just a little bit after the destruction of the temple, and they say, interestingly enough, that the Ark never made it to the Second Temple in the first place. Somewhere between the destruction of the First Temple in Judea and the later rebuilding of the Second, it apparently had gone missing. There are 2 main opinions posited at this point as to where it went. One says that the Babylonians carried it off after they razed the temple down, and if that's the case, I mean, we'd really have no idea where it is. It'd be missing without a trace for a few thousand years now, so good luck finding that. However, the other option is far more interesting. It's said that as the Jewish people saw things looking bad with the Babylonians besieging their temple, they took the Ark and buried it far beneath the Temple Mount in some hidden location. There's also a story mentioned a page later where a few priests were serving in the temple and they were looking around and they saw a floor tile that was shaped oddly and it was hollow beneath. So they went and told a few people about it, but when they went to show them the exact location of the tile, this person just died on the spot, and according to one source, he was incinerated. Alright, so that's all well and good. Now, it's one thing to say that the Ark of the Covenant is buried beneath the temple, but here's where things get a bit more wild. In the Book of Chronicles, one of the very last scriptural books of the Torah, it writes about the relocation of the Ark. However, it says something very odd. 22 years before the destruction of Solomon's temple, it writes how King Hoshea had the Ark moved out of its location in the temple and transferred to the house that Solomon, the son of David, the king of Israel, built. Now, this should strike you as odd immediately. The Torah is incredibly precise with its words. Every single seeming redundant line, phrase, word, or sometimes even letter is hyperanalyzed throughout the Talmud and other books to figure out the exact meaning of everything. There are no mistakes. And yet here, straight up in scripture, it says that the Ark of the Covenant was taken from Solomon's temple, from where it had never been moved before now, and transferred to the house that Solomon, the king of Israel, had built. Now, we know according to the later traditions that the Ark was placed somewhere underground beneath the Temple Mount, and apparently, according to this, in a location of some sort that King Solomon had built. I guess the logic being that Solomon, being the smartest person ever, foresaw the destruction of the temple and wanted to have a place to hide it away where nobody would ever be able to locate it until the right time. So, what's in this mysterious location? I don't know. I'd have to assume it would be pretty difficult for somebody to get through if they weren't intended to. I mean, Solomon was pretty smart. Apparently he was into automatons, like rudimentary animatronics too. Supposedly his throne had mechanical lions and birds and whatnot that walked him up his throne according to some other really old traditions, however that worked. So that's another point. Alright, next point. For those of you who don't know, the Temple Mount is filled with tunnels. Giant shafts, caves, corridors with branching paths crisscrossing up and down and all throughout the Temple Mount, in a manner which can only really be described as labyrinthian. Some of them are documented. Famously, there's Warren's Shaft, Chizkiah's Tunnel, some tunnels beneath the western wall, some others, but the majority of these networking lines have not been explored, and frankly, no one has ever really been down there. The reason for the lack of excavation around this extremely significant archaeological dig site is pretty simple. It also happens to be a massively important religious site too, and any proper excavations risk damaging the structures, but there have been some non-invasive attempts made using things like ground-penetrating radar and something to do with cosmic rays, which have revealed that yes, there is a massive network of tunnels beneath the temple which have yet to be explored. Here's where it gets even more crazy. One of the largest tunnels found is known as Warren's Gate, dug back in 1867, had an expedition sent down to explore back in 1981. This large gateway had been sealed centuries earlier by Saladin when he had conquered Jerusalem. It also happens to be almost directly beneath the precise location where the Ark would have been stored in the temple. A Rabbi Getz was with the expedition team, and they managed to open roughly a 2-foot wide hole through the sealed gateway to finally see what was on the other side, leading to an area which would have been never explored for literally thousands of years. It was filled with water and dirt, however, and an engineering team was called in to clear it. However, as they were in the middle of widening the passageway, a number of worshippers from above rushed in, and a confrontation broke out about the legality of people entering the Temple Mount, whether it applied beneath the Temple Mount, whatever. It was a whole thing. In the end, everyone was kicked out, and to this day, the location has never been properly searched. So, is the Ark of the Covenant right there? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe that leads to the start of a complex, deep, 1,000-year-old labyrinth filled with traps and riddles and ancient wandering automatons. No idea. Will it ever be looked into? I mean, probably not anytime soon. It'd be pretty difficult to get permits for such a thing. Well, according to Jewish tradition, the Ark of the Covenant is meant to be stored away, hidden from anybody until the time of the coming of Mashiach and the rebuilding of the Third Temple. So When that time comes, we'll find it. Let's try and expedite that, because I, for one, really want to see that happen and check out this cool labyrinth that may or may not exist. But until then, we'll keep trying. And with that said, I hope you found the video informative and interesting. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great night.